Stone. Rosetta Stone is, of course, a language learning program, and we aim to change lives through the power of language and literacy education. We firmly believe that every person can learn to speak, listen, read, and write with confidence, and that confidence is something that really serves as a backbone for our platforms. Now, here's a look at our agenda for today. We are going to start off with an overview of Rosetta Stone Catalyst, and I'll show you how your students will get started. After that, we'll discuss what those learners can expect from the two different learning pathways that they'll be working on. Now, learning pathways differ depending on the learner's previous experience and current proficiency with the language they're learning. So we'll take a look at the learner experience on both platforms. After that, we'll provide an overview of our mobile app and how your learners can take their Rosetta Stone practice on the go. And finally, we'll close with some tips on effective usage of the program, how to optimize language acquisition, and how to get additional support. As I said, once again, if you do have any questions as we go, please feel free to type those right there in the chat box. So Rosetta Stone Catalyst actually offers two different learning paths depending upon the proficiency of the user. There's a beginning pathway and there's an intermediate to advanced pathway. So the program actually starts by identifying the learner's proficiency level through a placement test. It will explore both your current proficiency levels, and also it will ask questions about target proficiency levels or your language goals. After that, the learner will be placed in the appropriate pathway. So you can see for the beginner learners, that's going to be called Foundations. And for intermediate to advanced speakers and communicators, that's called Fluency Builder. So in either pathway, those learners will have unlimited practice in the language through our online language lessons and extended learning opportunities. And if your school should decide to expand to a Catalyst Silver or Gold license, we also do have online tutoring with a certified native speaker as well. But at this time, your learners are not going to have access to that online unlimited tutoring. Now, at any time during the language acquisition journey, your learners can track their own progress towards meeting their personal and professional language goals. Now, let's talk a little bit about how your students will have the experience of getting started if they are just going to sign into Rosetta Stone for the first time. Now, your school has actually created a pretty unique activation process. There is a single link that your learners will be able to access from your learner management program. All right. Once those learners have logged into that LMS, they'll be able to click a link that will automatically create an account for them. Now, normally for most new learners, they actually have to have an email sent to them and they have to click on a link from an email, but we actually have it set up for your learners. So they're going to skip that process and they're going to come right here to the profile creation step. Now, this new account for Rosetta Stone is going to be linked to their school email address. So they'll see their name and their school email address. They're going to create their own special password, and they're also going to identify their language, the language they're learning, and their voice type and time zone. Again, we just want them to quickly create that profile creation because although they do have single sign-on, we want to make sure that they also have the ability to access their accounts via the mobile apps as well. Now, everyone starting Rosetta Stone Catalyst for the first time will also be asked to complete a short questionnaire. This will ask about personal learning goals, any goals that your school or class or course has for you. It'll ask about previous language learning experience and also general attitudes towards this language and language acquisition in general. As you can see, the questionnaire takes only about 5 minutes. And we include this important step to allow the program to automatically create timelines and goals for the language learning journey. Now, after that questionnaire, those learners will be given an assessment to evaluate their current language proficiency. Now, a quick thing to note here, the full language proficiency test is only for learners of English, Spanish, French, and German. If they are learning Portuguese or any other language, they will have a shorter pre-assessment. But again, for learners of English, Spanish, French, or German, that placement test can take 30, 40 minutes. So I do mention that because although the test starts easy and then gets progressively harder as the students are working, it does need to be completed in one sitting. So please make sure those learners know that when they are going to go ahead and start the placement test, that they have enough time set aside to complete that assessment again in one sitting. Now, after the student finishes that proficiency test, they will actually get to their results page, which shows them their scaled score and their CEFR level. Now, for those of you, if you're not familiar with CEFR, that's CEFR. It stands for the Common European Framework of Reference. And a CEFR is one of the most widely accepted norms for identifying overall language proficiency. So here's a quick example of what the students will see once they finish their proficiency test. So you can see here on the bottom left, this particular student had a scaled score of 259 out of 400. Now, folks, this is just a baseline score. The students don't need to worry about this score at all right now, but it is helpful for course placement, and it's also helpful for tracking progress. The reason I say that is that the students will actually be able to have periodic proficiency tests. And those happen after a certain number of days, as you can see over here, practicing in the program. And that baseline is going to allow us to measure their progress and growth with that language learning. You'll also see here the CEFR level. Now, the CEFR levels go from A1 to C2. So the A's are going to be beginner, the B's intermediate, and the C's advanced. So again, this is a student who is in the B2. So that's kind of the upper intermediate level for the language that they're learning. Now, folks, after completing the test and seeing the language results, from now on, the learner can just sign in directly using that same link from your school's learning management system. All right, so that's sort of the getting started gist of it. I don't see any questions there in the chat. So if there aren't any questions coming in, we can go ahead and move right into the learner experience. So when a learner signs in to Rosetta Stone, they are going to be brought to their Catalyst homepage. So here you can see an example of a Catalyst homepage. This learner is going to have lots of different information and features available to them each time they log in. Now, in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see here the personal goals for this particular learner. Now, these goals were actually automatically curated for this student based on that profile questionnaire that we talked about earlier. However, we can manually edit these. So if, for example, you all decide to provide specific goals or requirements to the students in your courses that are using Rosetta Stone, we can go ahead and edit those goals here. So again, for example, this student has 3 days a week for 20 minutes a day. So that's going to be 1 hour per week of practice. Maybe you'd like your learners to do more than that. So you can actually tell them, I want you to make this 5 days a week for 10 minutes or 15 or 30. Again, it's totally up to you, or it's up to the students to self-decide. In the top right, you can see the current language that this learner is practicing and their current CEFR level. So again, this is just a demo account of a student who is currently learning French. And that A2 is going to show me that they are in that beginner level, but in the upper beginner section. Now down below here, we can see that a learner can track their time towards meeting their goals right here at the bottom. You can see it's going to separate what I've done this month versus my all-time usage. It also will break down the difference between desktop or browser-based practice versus the mobile app. Also, learners can export that report if they'd like to see a spreadsheet with more information than what's shown here. Now, at this time, I want to draw your attention to the bottom right here. We have a feature called the interface language, and this allows all learners to actually have the ability to show all of the program in a different language. That's going to apply to the tips, the instructions, the directions, and the feedback. It's not, of course, going to change the language that they're learning. So what I mean by that is, if you see right here, it says English. Well, I can click this and I can go ahead and put this in Español, por ejemplo. And now you'll see instantaneously my page just changed. And so everything here is now being shown in Spanish. But of course, that doesn't change that my student is still learning French. So the content of the language they're learning is still the same, but all of the directions, the instructions, the tips, hints, and prompts are going to be changed into whatever language is most helpful for that learner. So again, that's just an optional feature if the learners would like to practice seeing those words and directions in another language as well. Now, whenever your learners are ready to begin, this is where they will actually click to access those language lessons online. Here in the My Products section, you can see for this student, it says Foundations. Now, remember, that's the beginner pathway or product because this student is at that A2 level. If they were above the A2 level, this would say Fluency Builder. So we're going to start with looking at Foundations, which again is that beginner pathway. Remember, that's going to take learners from a pre-A1 level up to the B1 level on the CFIR scale, meaning that students can actually progress from extremely limited language proficiency to speaking and responding in complete sentences. So with that, folks, let's go ahead and actually dive right into the Foundations account. And again, we do so just by clicking right here on Foundations. And that's going to bring us right into the program. Now, in Rosetta Stone Foundations, we recommend that learners complete the lessons and activities that they see in order. The lessons on Foundations are scaffolded in a linear manner. And again, it's important to go through the activities in order and keep working on them until you reach the minimum proficiency score. Now, here you can see our unit page. And each unit contains 4 lessons. You can see those different lesson tabs here. And then each lesson, of course, is made up of a variety of different focused activities. So if a student is just accessing this for the first time, of course, they will be brought to Unit 1, Lesson 1. But if they've already been working in a higher unit, they will always be brought to their next up recommended lesson or where they just left off the last time they practiced. So for now, let's go ahead and dive into this core lesson here. Now I'm going into the Unit 1, Lesson 1 core lesson. That's going to mean that this is for a beginner. So again, just wanted to put on our newcomer language learner hats here. And again, it's going to seem quite easy, but I want to give you an idea of what it looks like at the very basics. And then we can explore a little bit of a higher unit a little bit later. So once we go ahead and access the program, the first thing that students will likely see is a microphone check. So this is important to realize that there is actually quite a bit of speaking and listening going on in Rosetta Stone. Again, we have a commitment to all 4 language learning modalities: speaking, listening, reading, and writing. So we want to make sure that learners know that they will have to calibrate their headphones, and those headphones do need a built-in microphone in order for them to fully immerse themselves in what we have to offer. All we have to do is click begin and count to 5 at a normal volume and a normal pace. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this just, again, sets up the program for success with the audio input and make sure that everything is calibrated for our speech recognition software. So now we're going to be taken right into the lesson.
Bonjour.
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 So as you can see, we're going to get learners speaking right away, but we have lots of different question types as well.
Une fille. Un garçon. Une fille. Un garçon.
La fille mange. La fille boit. Le garçon mange.
So I also wanted to point out a couple additional features. We do have this little blue play button. So if there's any reason that a learner needs to hear that again, they can go ahead and click that and it'll give them that native speaker reading that out loud. We can also expand the text size if we need to for some reason, if they're using a small device, and we can expand image sizes as well so we can always see what's going on.
Le garçon mange.
Now, as you can see, I just got a question wrong and I heard that sound and got a little red X on there. And I wanted to point out that if a learner ever gets something wrong, they're always going to be provided with the opportunities to learn from their mistake. And that really is a key feature of the program. We're never going to tell a student, nope, that was wrong, and then just move them on to the next question. They always have to, again, go through that natural language learning process of making a mistake, learning from the mistake, and then correcting the mistake.
Le garçon boit.
Now, because I did make a mistake, we'll see that track down here in the bottom by this small red X. And that's just letting me know that I did initially make a mistake. I can go back and try that again if I'd like to change that X to a check mark. Now, in question 4, we're going to see our speech recognition engine in play. This uses a feature called true accent, and we're going to have the learner repeat something that they hear from a native speaker, and then we're going to compare their fluency and pronunciation to hundreds of native speakers from this language. The learner will then get some feedback based on how they did.
Une fille.
Une fille.
Une fille.
So you can see there that fully filled in green circle is going to indicate to me that I was able to pronounce that word with near perfect pronunciation. What happens if I don't do that?
Un garçon.
Ungracing. Ungrossing. Un garçon.
Un garçon.
So as you could see there, the first time or two, I did not pronounce that correctly. And so my circle was red or orange, again, letting me know that I needed to try again. I can always click the blue play button to hear the native speaker pronounce that word or phrase out loud. And then finally, I was able to get it right and I got that green check. Now, on Rosetta Stone Foundations, we're going to, again, scaffold and spiral language throughout each level. So we want those students to answer all of those questions correctly. I want to show you a few different types of questions, though, because it's not just always matching and clicking. So here we have an example of a listening comprehension question.
L'homme mange.
So again, no text is on the screen, and I'm trying to use what I learned earlier to go ahead and identify just from listening.
La femme mange. La fille mange.
If I jump ahead a little bit, we can see some examples of introducing new vocabulary for the first time. So again, there's no translation. There are no conjugation charts here. We are going to actually, again, immerse and make sure that learners are experiencing a structured immersion process. So again, they are going to only be introduced to certain content at a certain time. And every single new vocabulary and grammar concept that they see is always going to be accompanied by an image. So again, here you can see we're actually introducing the verb to run for the first time. But of course, they would have already learned the words for boy, girl, man, and woman. And so now we're bringing those back, but we're showing those images of people running. So that's what they associate with. Again, this is based on learning science and how we all learn languages when we were young, right? We didn't have translation. We just had repetition and we had our natural sense of using the visual to understand the world around us.
Le garçon court.
Now we can also do the same thing here with grammar. So up until this point, we've been learning different verbs like reading, writing, eating, drinking. We've also been learning those pronouns. And here, instead of the man or the woman, we are actually introducing pronouns for the first time. So here we have, again, another example of what I like to call use what you know to get to what you don't know. And the learners will be now able to infer from what they have already learned what these pronouns are referring to.
Il mange. Elle boit. Il court. Elle lit.
Now, again, folks, the learners will go through this whole lesson, and then when they get to the end, they will have to go ahead and start producing their own language independently here for the first time. Now, remember, this was just our lesson 1 example for a beginner, but you can already see, even if this was day 1 of a student learning French for the very first time, they would already really have this experience of feeling successful and also hopefully motivated, because at the end of just that very first lesson, they're already able to look at an image and produce their own language independently, again, to describe what's happening in that image. Now, we're going to give them some help, obviously, and give them some tips along the way. But again, that's a really, really good feeling of accomplishment for those learners.
Elle boit. Elle mange. Il boit.
Il mange.
Il mange.
So again, as you can see, that we definitely had some support there, but in the end, they didn't hear something first and repeat it. They went ahead and spoke that on their own. So folks, that is kind of the natural way that the Foundations program works. And again, it mimics the same way that we all learned our very first language, right? We're going to start with just some simple basic language that might be words of people in a family. We're going to stick with that, and we're going to slowly expand into slightly more complex sentences, but still keeping it basic, just to introduce new verbs, just to introduce subject-verb agreement or plural and singular. And then, of course, we're going to take those learners up to and through that intermediate level of language where they're able to really put their language into practice. Now, one important thing to note about Rosetta Stone that sometimes sets us apart from some of those other programs out there is that all of the language that we are teaching is going to be relevant and useful. We've really been purposeful with making sure that all the language that students see is going to be something that they may actually use one day in a real world scenario. We are never going to just teach random phrases or sentences like you may see in some other programs out there. Now, folks, when a student is looking at their lesson page, they will always be able to see their scores, if they are in progress or if they've completed something. Also, if they did not pass, we will always show them the score they need to pass. Now, when I say pass, this isn't obviously for a grade or anything like that. However, learners do need to pass each particular activity in order to get credit for completing that activity in case someone is looking at those completion results. So we do have 3 different passing scores here. And the reason that there are 3 is that they are based on the actual rigor of that activity type. So for the grammar, listening, reading, and vocab activities, those students must earn a 90% to pass. For the core lesson and review, we need an 85. And then for those more rigorous ones where the learners have to actually produce their own language, speaking, writing, pronunciation, those learners have to get a 75%. Now, folks, in that earlier demo, we were looking at some of the more simple questions there in our first lesson. I wanted to also take you through to a little bit higher unit here. So here we can see a slightly higher unit. And why don't we go ahead and check out one of the writing activities, because these are a little bit different than the ones that we've seen before. Now, on writing activities, the learners will always start with a little review, and then they'll be taken right into a writing example.
17 assiettes.
So here you can see that I have a word or phrase that was just spoken by a native speaker, and I have a keyboard here on my screen. Now, you may also notice that this keyboard looks a little bit different than the traditional keyboard your learners will probably be used to. And that's because we are going to provide them with the various accents or other keys that might be useful for this specific language. So again, this is someone who's learning French, so we have certain accents here. But of course, if this was someone who was learning Spanish, they might have that ñ or the L available here on their keyboard. Now, we can use the on-screen keyboard, or we can go ahead and just use the physical device keyboard as well. This blue button right here, if you see that blue key, that's going to go ahead and give me access to even more accents or characters if needed. So I can always go ahead and click that button to get to those extra characters as well. So I think that's what I heard earlier. Let's see if I'm right. Awesome.
18 balles.
So I also wanted to show you what happens if, again, we don't get something right. So I got that one wrong, and I'm going to go ahead and just listen to it again.
18 balles.
Okay, so if I was typing that phonetically from what I heard, it looks like about right, but I see there's a little highlight right here. So that's actually going to let me know that that's where my mistake occurred. So we're going to give them a little bit of support there. Let's see if I got it better now. Oh, I still have something wrong here. And that's, of course, because I didn't make it plural. So now I should be good to go, and I can go ahead and
19
move on.
fleurs.
So you can see that this is obviously much more rigorous, right, than our initial lesson that we were practicing. And this is unit 3. As students proceed to those higher units, the content is going to, again, move up in rigor and complexity as they go. If your students ever need a little extra practice with letter sounds, pronunciation, and phonetics, they can always click on their name and access what's called our alphabet tool. So you can see here where it says alphabet. If I click that, it brings me to the alphabet tool. The alphabet tool is, of course, unique for each language. So you're going to be able to learn not only the letter names themselves, but also see several different options of how that letter is used in different scenarios. So for example, I could go here and I could see that sometimes this is a hard G.
Garçon.
But other times it's a soft G.
Fromage.
So again, for phonetics and for really improving pronunciation, the alphabet tool is a great way for learners to practice and make sure that they are on the right track with that pronunciation. Now, folks, here you can just see these are short phrases. When those learners work up to higher units, they will eventually have full sentences they'll have to type. And then at the uppermost units, they will actually have to respond to questions in full sentences. So they are getting that writing practice as well. So I'm just going to pause there momentarily to see if there are any questions about our foundations platform, about the type of lessons and activities. Again, there's many different types of questions that students will see, and there are lots of units available. So far, we've been looking just at Unit 1, and a quick example from Unit 3. A learner can always click on the Show Menu button to see the full curriculum. So here is the curriculum, and you can see it's made up of 20 units in all. So this is going to be quite a bit of content for learners to practice and work their way through. We also have 20 units for our other most popular languages. If students choose one of the lesser practiced languages, it may only have 12 units. But again, each unit here has a short description of the unit theme. So if a learner is specifically interested, say, in practicing their language for eating out at a restaurant, they could navigate directly to Unit 8 and practice that. But again, we do recommend in general that wherever they start, and they don't have to start at Unit 1, they can start anywhere, wherever they start, that they go in order. Now, we do have one additional resource that I wanted to mention to you all to make sure that your learners know about. And this is called the Scope and Sequence Guide. So here on the unit menu, we can see the general topic of each unit. But if we want to know exactly what's in every unit in terms of the actual grammar that's taught, or the different vocabulary or language structures, we can switch over to our scope and sequence guide. So I have this pulled up here, and I'll even zoom in a little bit on it. And so here you can see this is my unit 1. And remember, each unit is made up of 4 lessons. So I have the 4 lessons listed here. And then it tells me the core concepts, the vocabulary for each lesson, and the grammar and usage topics as well. So again, if I go down to unit 3, where we were just looking, you can see there that we were working there with those numbers up to 20. And then there's other question words, times of day, workplaces, again, different vocabulary themes that are going to be present. So if, again, a learner is looking for a specific type of information, they could use the scope and sequence guide as well. And they could go ahead and navigate, again, for example, unit 8, food and restaurant language. I know lesson 1 has a whole core lesson all about ordering in a restaurant, making reservations, and different helpful phrases that can get them improve proficiency for that specific category. All right, folks. So again, now that we are kind of experts there on our unit menu and our curriculum map here, I want to jump back here and just take a moment to review those activities we mentioned. Again, the core lesson is always where learners should start. We have a variety of different focused activities. The students will also have 4 review opportunities within each unit that will go back and, of course, do what reviews do, allow them to practice previous content for reinforcement. And then finally, the last activity I want to talk about here in Foundations before we pivot away is called the milestone. Now, folks, there's one milestone at the end of each unit. This is a summative activity, and it takes this structured immersion process we talked about earlier to the next level by simulating a real life situation and relying on active participation by the student. So let me go ahead and show you what this looks like, okay? I'm going to go in here to a unit. And remember, I said that it's a summative activity, meaning it's always all the way at the very end. That means I have to go to lesson 4, and I have to scroll all the way to the bottom to get to that milestone. Now, this is how the milestone works. The students will see a series of pictures slide across the screen, and that sets up their place in the story. And then they will actually have to speak and respond to questions based on the people and scenario that they find themselves in. So again, here we can see in this milestone that the student will be invited to start having a conversation with these pre-recorded native speakers. So here you can see some folks going for a walk to a movie theater.
Quel est le type de film que tu aimes?
Quel est le type de film que tu aimes?
Quel est le type de film que tu aimes?
J'aime tous les types de films sauf les films tristes.
As-tu vu ce film?
As-tu vu ce film?
As-tu vu ce film?
Oui, je l'ai déjà vu.
So up until this point, we've heard and seen the language prompts that we're expected to speak. So that's just getting us warmed up. Eventually, we will have to start, again, providing those questions on our own. So we have to promote and provide our own language independently without hearing or seeing it first. Quel type de film est-ce?
C'est quel type de film?
C'est une comédie.
Quelle est l'histoire de ce film?
Quelle est l'histoire de ce film?
Quelle est l'histoire de ce film?
C'est l'histoire d'un étudiant en biologie qui fait une expérience dans le laboratoire de sa classe.
Pourquoi est-ce que c'est drôle?
Pourquoi est-ce que c'est drôle?
So again, you can see there that I was given the answer, but I had to actually ask a correct question based on the answer that I saw. So again, it's really putting students in a position where they can synthesize everything they've learned in that particular unit and really develop confidence in applying their new skills in a conversational format. Again, this is a safe space, and it's a wonderful opportunity for students to improve their speaking and listening proficiencies in particular. All right, so I'm just going to jump out of this. I did see a question come in the chat about the mobile app, so I'm absolutely going to address that a little bit later on in our presentation. But in short, yes, absolutely, the students can download our app and use Rosetta Stone on the go. And again, I'll go into a little bit more detail about that momentarily. So up until this point, we've been talking about all of our online language lessons here on the Home tab, but we actually have some additional opportunities for learners to extend their learning. And to do that, we're going to click on the Explore All Content tab here, our second tab in the top left of our navigation bar. So here we have several other extended opportunities for learning. And actually, some of these are really exciting. The first here at the top, you can see we have some on-demand lectures that your learners can access to dive into different specific concepts and improve fluency with everyday scenarios. These are free on-demand videos that they can access at any time. We also have something called stories. Now, folks, stories are going to be aligned to the units that those learners were practicing. And we actually have many different stories aligned to every single unit of the Rosetta Stone Foundations. So here you can see across the top 1 through 20. And these stories, again, allow the learner to go ahead and read, listen, and speak to interact with these stories. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So here that I'm in this story, which is about a doctor and a sick girl, we can see 3 tabs across the top: read, listen, and speak. So this is an extension opportunity. So the learners, after they've been practicing in this unit, they can come and read through this story to see if they can understand everything in it. Now, they might notice that some of those words are blue. A blue word is going to be highlighted and a picture will be provided in case that's a vocabulary word that they don't know. Now, after they've read through the little story there, they can also listen to the story being read aloud to them by a native speaker.
Le médecin et la fille malade. La fille est dans son lit.
So again, they can listen to it to just get a little extra practice with the pronunciation. Finally, we have the Speak tab for your learners that need a little bit more practice with their speaking fluency. This is where they can record themselves reading the same story out loud. They will even get some feedback based on how they did with that recording. Le médecin et la fille malade. La fille est dans son lit. Un médecin est assis sur une chaise et écrit. So again, I made some mistakes there on purpose because I wanted to show you that we do get some different types of feedback. We get gray words that the program didn't hear me say that. We get red words that the program thinks I made a mistake. And we also get these vertical lines that show that I paused for longer than normal. So again, the learners will get feedback based on their pronunciation and fluency, and that's available in our hundreds of stories that we have again here that also introduce some cultural relevant topics that are not practiced in the language lessons themselves. So again, for a little extra culture, exploring regions or people that speak the language that they're learning, you could certainly encourage your learners to look at our stories section. Another really great part is our phrase books. Phrase books are really fun for more pronunciation and listening skill development. Again, this is a great way to build the confidence. Again, I could jump in here and I can just practice listening and speaking to these specific phrases.
Je suis perdu.
Je suis perdu. So again, you can see we even get feedback there on how well we pronounced that sentence. And again, we can go through and we can learn those different types of phrases for directions. And finally, I wanted to quickly mention that we also have our audio companion. This is really great for taking Rosetta Stone on the go because this does not require a student to interact with the screen. In other words, if they're exercising, if they're driving, if they are on other transportation, this is where they can listen and repeat without actually having to look at anything at all. So you could download this onto your phone, for example, and while you're on your way to school, you could listen and practice speaking in your head or out loud if the situation permits it. And that's, again, a fantastic way to train for listening and speaking. All right, folks, so that's everything here in our Explore All Content tab. The final thing I want to quickly mention for your students, just in case they come to you and they're asking for some troubleshooting with their settings, there is a gearbox up here in the very top right corner, and this gives access to our settings. We have audio settings and course settings. The audio settings I want to talk about are mostly down here at the bottom where it says pronunciation setting. So for all of your learners by default, they are going to be on a level 3 out of 10, which is set to normal. This is going to mean that the rigor for their pronunciation scoring is at that 3 out of 10 level. If your learners want to hold themselves to a higher standard or expectation for pronunciation, they can go ahead and raise that level up. So again, if I raise that up, it's going to be, again, comparing my input to that of native speakers. And when I apply those changes, it's going to go ahead and increase the rigor of the pronunciation scoring. I also have course settings. Now, the course settings mostly refer to the different expectations for those writing activities. So I can actually decide if I need it to be case sensitive, punctuation sensitive for those full sentences, and diacritic sensitive. Diacritic, of course, referring to accents. So if you don't think accents are important, your students can turn that off, and it's not going to mark something wrong if they're missing an accent on a character. But again, that's an option there. So again, folks, that's going to pretty much wrap up everything I wanted to talk about with the Foundations Beginner Platform. So please let me know at this time if you have any questions about the Foundations platform. All right, folks, that was my obligatory 5-second teacher wait time. I didn't hear any or see any questions, so we're going to go ahead and move right along. So as I mentioned earlier, if your learner is an intermediate to advanced speaker already, they will be placed into what's called Fluency Builder. Again, this is the second pathway that we introduced earlier. And Fluency Builder is, again, designed to take those learners from the B1 up through the C1 level on that CFER scale. In other words, those students will already be able to communicate at a basic level and understand general content. Once they complete all of Fluency Builder, they will really have developed a much more advanced speaking proficiency, being able to read much more complex texts, literature, business reports, and have a much better ability to decode that complex content. Now, unlike Foundations, Fluency Builder does not need to be done in any particular order. Instead, learners can choose which topics work best for them from our selection of courses. We have lots of different courses, and each course consists of multiple different lessons that you can see here. And then each lesson actually has many different micro activities. Now, we call these micro activities because we've actually designed this for busy learners. In other words, they will be able to jump into here, even if they only have 2 or 3 minutes, and complete one of those activities. And again, the Fluency Builder program in general allows learners to develop specific skills or vocabulary pertinent to certain professional needs or industries. So I know that I have faculty with me today from a variety of different departments. So Fluency Builder is really what I'm most excited to introduce to you all, because again, you'll notice that our learners have access to a variety of different, very specific industries or subjects. So again, I've switched over now to my demo account for Fluency Builder, and this is actually a learner who is practicing English, which I know is actually the most common language that your students are currently enrolled in for Fluency Builder. So as you can see, there are some similarities to Foundations, but it looks a little bit different. You'll see here, I'm now on my course dashboard, and you can see that some of the courses I already have, like meeting etiquette, customer service and sales, business communication, are already here. I also have some lessons that are specifically here for certain industries, health and medicine, for example. Now, if I don't have the course that I'm interested in here, I can always click in the top right, and I can browse and add additional courses if I would be interested in that. So I click add courses, and now I see all at the top, all of the different topics that I have available to me. I can scroll through those topics, and I can see if there are some that apply to either my specific field of study or my future professional goals. So for example, I can look at industries and professions. Maybe I have learners that I already know are interested in the automotive industry. So I can go ahead and access that course and add that to my dashboard just by clicking the plus sign here in the top left or the add course button. Those do the same thing. So now that I've added that course, I'm going back to my course dashboard. And again, all of my other courses are there, but I now see the automotive industry is present. I can also see that it has 6 lessons. So again, let's go ahead and start that lesson. And once I've entered this course, I have 6 different lessons. So I have a registration, I have some information about autonomous vehicle production, inspections, different information that, again, may be relevant to your specific learners. Now, once I go ahead and click start for any particular lesson, that's when it's going to bring me to the menu here on the left-hand side of all these different micro activities. So this actually is going to target reading skills. So I know that this specific lesson is targeted towards reading practice and reading comprehension. So here you can see that it's going to provide a form. And again, this is going to be particularly helpful for certain students in certain situations. So this is just the document for this activity. And then students are going to have the opportunity to practice their language. Now I'm getting this mic check again, just because I switched accounts. Again, your learners are not going to get this multiple times like I have. They only will have to do this the first time that they log in that day. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So here we have some vocabulary practice, and the learners will not only see the definition, they can hear it.
Ambulance.
And they can even practice speaking it if they want. Ambulance. All right, so again, we're going to introduce all of these different terms to those learners for practice. And then, of course, they're going to have different options, okay, for completing these different activities. Now, folks, this activity, because it's reading specific, is pretty heavy on those fill in the blank and the multiple choice, but we actually have different types of information here in a lot of these activities where you'll see that there are places where they have to type in words or phrases. They might actually have videos in there that they have to listen, read, and answer questions. And they're even going to have some grammar lessons presented to them here in Fluency Builder as well. So here we're talking about the present perfect. So that's going to be, of course, the example shown here on the right. So you can see that Fluency Builder is certainly a bit different than Foundations. It's for learners that are already developed to that intermediate to advanced level, and they can come in here and they can work regardless of how much time they have on these different reading, writing, listening, and speaking activities. Now, I did hear from some of your academic administration beforehand that some of your learners might really need to target specific learning competencies or communicative modes. So as I mentioned with Foundations, we also have a scope and sequence guide for Fluency Builder as well. So if I switch over to the Fluency Builder scope and sequence guide momentarily, I wanted to show you this because this is where students can actually choose activities based on the communication mode. For instance, if I scroll down here, you can see that for each of those courses and lessons, the targeted skill is going to actually be listed here in my second column. So again, this is really valuable because let's say that those learners actually really want to focus on just reading and writing skills. Well, now I can find specific lessons that I know target those. But let's say that I really more want to focus on speaking. So here you can see one that's reading and speaking heavy. Again, practicing conversations. Some of them cover all four, and some are, here's just speaking and listening, an emergency scenario. Okay, so again, you can encourage your learners to use that scope and sequence guide, or again, if it's a specific lesson that applies to your area of expertise, you could say, okay, I am a pre-med and I think that folks should be learning this lesson about the cold, the common cold, right? So let's go ahead and practice that lesson. So again, folks, that is our scope and sequence guide. And I'll show you where to locate all of these resources in just a little bit. All right, folks, I'm going to pause there again just to see if there are any questions about the Fluency Builder platform that we just looked at. All right, I appreciate the feedback there in the chat. We'll move right along now and jump into the next section, which is all about our mobile app. Now, folks, as I've mentioned earlier, included with your licenses is access to our award-winning and completely free mobile apps. We actually have two separate mobile apps, one for learners that are using Foundations and one for those that are using Fluency Builder. Again, it works on all different types of devices and operating systems. The one with the yellow background is for Foundations. For those that are placed in that beginner pathway, make sure they are downloading the yellow background Learn Languages app. For Fluency Builder, which is about 70% of your learners right now, they're going to want to download the white background Fluency Builder app. And they can, of course, still sign in with their same credentials. If they can access your learning management system on their phone, that's the easiest and quickest way to sign in, because that will actually auto launch their app and sign them in directly. So if they're using Blackboard, for example, they can go into Blackboard. They can click that link for Rosetta Stone from within the Blackboard app, and it will auto launch their Rosetta app once, of course, they've downloaded it to their phone. Now, folks, if your students are having any trouble logging into the mobile app, there actually is a feature on our dashboard that can allow students to get all of the sign-in information sent directly to them. I'm going to show you what that looks like momentarily, just because I believe it will be very helpful for all of your learners. So when I sign in here, I'm just going to go back to our initial dashboard. And right here on the right-hand side, it says, get our mobile app. If a student enters their email address, again, their school email address right here, and presses send, it will actually send them an email with all of the specific directions on how to log into the app. It will also include a link to the correct app that they should download. So I would honestly just have students log in for the first time on the computer. Go ahead and put their email address here, and then it will send them an email that they can open on their phone, and it will direct them to the correct app and show them the step-by-step directions that they need to log into the program. Now, folks, I wanted to speak about a few features that we have on our mobile app that are not available on the browser-based version of Rosetta Stone. One for the foundations pathway only, it's called Seek and Speak. Now, Seek and Speak is going to be a fantastic interactive discovery feature for learners in that beginner pathway. This actually allows learners to use their camera to turn everyday objects into language practice using the latest object recognition technology. It works similar to a scavenger hunt where students can actually search for items to complete a quest. So once they find all the items, they can learn the meanings of those items in the language they're learning, of course. And this feature is available on the home screen within the extended learning section of the mobile app. Speaking of the extended learning, you'll remember earlier I mentioned the stories and the audio companion. This is where those students can download that audio companion. Remember, that allows them to take that language training on the go and practice speaking and listening skills. But more importantly, I wanted to mention our offline mode. So we have recently released this, and I think it's such a wonderful opportunity that brings a lot of equity to our program. We now have the ability for all learners to access Rosetta Stone, even if they don't have internet access. So now our offline mode allows learners to choose the lessons they want. You can download them directly to the device. And just by clicking that use offline, they will be available for learners for up to 30 days for each lesson. Now, folks, again, now those learners, if they don't have unlimited data plans, if they don't have reliable Wi-Fi always at home, or even if they're just on the go, right, in a plane, in a metro, subway, they can still access those lessons. And so again, just make sure that learners know if they are working in offline mode, it's totally fine. But next time they do have access to Wi-Fi, they should go ahead and open up that app again, because it will sync up all of their progress and scores from their offline practice. So again, whenever they're back on Wi-Fi, you want to make sure that they log back in with that same device and sync up all of their practice and progress. All right, folks, so that brings us now to some best practices. Many of you, I'm sure, are already aware of many of the things I'm going to talk about, but it's worth mentioning to go ahead and make sure that learners understand some of the different features of learning practice. So first of all, let's discuss usage. In order to really get the most out of the program, we know that learning takes time and it takes consistency. So we do recommend 1 to 2 hours per week. Again, we know folks have really busy schedules, but we hope that they can fit in 20 minutes a day or so. Again, as you all know, the repetition and the consistency is actually more important than just the overall time. So even if they can only fit in 15 minutes, we'd rather them do that multiple times per week than maybe only doing it all on a Sunday for a whole hour, for example. That's going to lead to quicker recall and also provide for better long-term memory. We also, of course, recommend a headset with an attached microphone. We have found that the program provides the best results when there is a microphone that is placed in front of the mouth. It does, however, work just fine with any type of headphones or headsets with an embedded microphone. Again, if that's down on the wire, it's going to perhaps pick up other background noise. And so it may affect the speaking recognition engine type of activities. We also want to talk about commitment. So one great key that we've found, especially for young adults, is that we recommend they schedule their language practice sessions into their personal or school calendars to help keep track of them and to stay more consistent. So again, once we treat this just like another appointment and we develop those healthy routines, we've seen that learners get much more consistency and better results from the practice. So definitely encourage them to schedule those onto their calendars, whether that's on their phone or anywhere else. We also recommend tapping into technology and the resources available to connect with things that they already enjoy, right? Maybe you like listening to music. Maybe you like watching movies. Maybe you listen to podcasts or the news, or really just love reading books. Well, why not download or access what you enjoy in your target language, right? That way they can spend more time learning, but also enjoying practicing that language. Finally, for extra practice with speaking and listening, we suggest making a language learning buddy, right? So maybe you can facilitate that process, or maybe you just recommend that the students do it on their own. But why not make plans to meet up for an immersion coffee or lunch so that they can help each other to really immerse themselves for that short period of time, but really gain more confidence, develop the communication that they need to help their language learning progress. Finally, folks, a little something that we can do as administrators and support staff is celebrate successes. So as a faculty or a teacher, maybe we can keep a leaderboard for those students who are using the program the most, or we can send out weekly or monthly usage updates to encourage participation. You all actually have access to getting reports about your learners' progress. To do that, you're going to contact your learning resource specialists, librarians, or tech support folks, because they have access to the Catalyst dashboard, and they can go ahead and run reports on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, to let you know which of your students are using the program the most. And you can go ahead and communicate that information. Given just a little shout out at the beginning of a class can really motivate other learners, or even just serve as a fantastic reminder to those learners. So again, if you have any question about the reports or how to get that data sent to you, please feel free to type that in the chat box, or you can always send me an email, benp@rosettastone.com. Again, your academic administrators have a list of folks for each campus that are going to be the resource people for you all to reach out to get those reports sent out for you for data analytics. So with that, folks, we are actually going to come to near the end of our session today. I do want to show you, before we wrap up though, how you can access our support site, which contains helpful information on getting access to those scope and sequence guides, and also getting much more information about the program in general. So that site is called support.rosettastone.com. And again, let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like. And we can go ahead and do a quick practice here where we find some extra information. So here we have our support site. I'm going to go ahead and drag that over here. And on the support site, you can see, again, support.rosettastone.com. You can go ahead and search by topics here: training and resources, technical problems, login help. Or what I like to do is just use the little magnifying glass up here and type in something, for example, scope and sequence. So there you can see scope and sequence guides for Fluency Builder. So I can go ahead and access those. And here they are for Spanish, French, German, English, and Italian, for example. If you're looking for the foundation scope and sequence, that's also available right here. We also have many other support articles and frequently asked questions. If you're looking for help learning more about Catalyst, you can go ahead and click on that. There is going to be information about the mobile apps and everything that learners need to do to get started there. So again, that's our support site. And again, you can even chat with some of our helpful tech support folks. So with that, folks, I just wanted to leave you with this last slide. Now, first of all, I would love if you all have some time that you complete a quick survey on today's presentation. You can see the survey address here. I'm going to go ahead and paste this in the chat box as well, just in case you have a minute or two later in your day. That's just to help me, of course, with my presentation of today's session, and also give us some feedback on the content of the session itself. I also wanted to make sure that you have our help desk phone number, my email again here, as well as a general tech support email, instsupport@rosettastone.com. And again, just a reminder, for 24/7 online support, you can go to support.rosettastone.com and you can either chat with a live representative or search for the frequently asked questions and documents that you have. So with that, I just want to say thank you all so much. Merci beaucoup. Muchas gracias. We appreciate you for partnering with us here at Rosetta Stone. And we have a few more minutes, so I'll stick around to see if there are any other questions. But again, please stay safe and stay well. If you have everything you need, feel free to hop off the call today. And once again, we appreciate you joining us, especially on a Saturday. And again, never hesitate to reach out if you do have any questions moving forward.